We are back with more NFL draft coverage. Yes, it has certainly been a while, and I should have gotten around to this much earlier. But like I stated in the last one, there were so many interesting developments that took place to where I couldn't not double, maybe triple back on talking about everything. So in this one, I'll just go through what I thought were the most interesting, developments through all 7 rounds. And there are also some other news that have come in that I'll be talking about, but those will be at the end of the video. So to get things started, in the first round, obviously we had the Travis Hunter and Mason Graham trade that eventually sent the latter to the Browns, which honestly ended up making the most sense because, again, you really think about it, where the Browns are at right now, they could have gone a load of different directions at that point of time. Nothing had really taken place yet. But I guess, you have to credit the Jaguars for at least pouncing on the opportunity, because the Browns were one of the teams with GMs who stated that they would not mind having Travis Hunter play on both sides of the ball. That's what Andrew Berry himself said. So there's honestly a good chance that the Browns could have taken him there. At the same time, would they have really needed him the most out of any other player there? I don't necessarily think so. Obviously, as a skill position player, they would definitely love to have him after losing Elijah Moore. And then also, as a potential tertiary option to shore up that cornerback room that already consists of Denzel Ward and Greg Newsome II, wouldn't necessarily be the worst thing from a talent perspective, but there were other positions of need on that team. And to get a player in Mason Graham who terrorized offenses left and right, regardless of who he might have been facing for years. Some of the best competition in the nation, obviously Ohio State, but well-respected offenses were just crumbling against that Michigan unit, in large part due to what Mason Graham was contributing. So I appreciated the trade. It definitely was a shocker to have one happen so early on. But again, it's not necessarily like it was involving any existing players on the roster or anything. We did not get a whole lot of that this draft, outside of a few. But, those weren't necessarily eventful, impactful enough. This one, though, for the Jags to get Travis Hunter back, with what they just did with one of their wide receivers, which I'll get into at the tail end of the video when I talk about other developments outside of this space, he would be serving as a potential number 2 to Brian Thomas Jr. anyway as a wide receiver, and now it seems like that could very much be the case. Also, as a corner, you have him alongside Tyson Campbell now. You have Jordan Lewis in the slot potentially. They could be building something dangerous down there in Jacksonville. If things go according to plan, there is a chance that he could become some semblance of the next Jalen Ramsey. Now, not totally. Their play styles on the defensive side of the ball are very different from each other. But Jalen Ramsey had such a great impact on that team, even in the short amount of time that he was there. Travis Hunter could do virtually the same thing in the right context, and also be able to contribute offensively. So that's just a grand pickup for them. Later on in the first round, the Panthers would shockingly pick up Tyrell McMillan. Now, granted, obviously I had him mocked going to the Jaguars, and at that point, Jacksonville got their guy. There was no reason for me to believe that any of the other teams outside of maybe the Raiders Pats or Jets could have honestly picked him up if they wanted to. But for the Panthers to get him, I was like, okay, I can understand it. Adam Thielen had a pretty solid year for them last year, but in all honesty, he is getting older. He's going to phase out of the league relatively soon. And outside of Xavier Leggett, you don't really have a lot of surefire plans at the wide receiver position right now if you are Carolina. To potentially bolster that unit for the future by hopefully allowing Leggett to continue and develop, and then top that off by getting a player as great as Tyrod McMillan can potentially be, especially with how he looks coming out of college. The combination of size and speed and just the pure ability to bring down the football is absolutely ridiculous. And for a team that has struggled to have their wide receivers get separation, McMillan seems like a player that, obviously he's not going to be able to get past everyone all of the time. And even then, you'd still have faith in throwing up the football to him because he can literally just outmuscle your favorite cornerback and just get the damn reception anyways. So I found that to be really smart from the Panthers. One thing that I found to be really stupid for the Bears is that with 10 they selected Colston Loveland. I'm like, fuck him at that point. This Michigan ass nigga, look, he can obviously be a good tight end. At the same time, if you were really hell-bent on finding some sort of future replacement or supplementary plan for Cole Kmet, the least you could do is get the best available talent at that position. Tyler Warren was still on the board at this point. And you get the worst prospect. That just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Really doesn't. The Falcons would do some pretty interesting things in this first round as well. For them to take a chance on Jalen Walker, the edge rusher out of Georgia, and then also trade up from the second round to go and nab James Pierce Jr. with the 26th overall pick was honestly very smart on their end. And I definitely liked those pair of moves right there. Because what they had referenced when they made the move is that they desperately needed the pass rush as it is. They bolstered their secondary a little bit over the past couple of seasons, but their defense has largely not been great over the past few years, especially when it comes to being able to rush the passer. They've been a bottom 3 unit or so the past 3 seasons in terms of generating sacks, and that's even with a guy like Matthew Judon being brought over there for that very reason. And they still couldn't get much production outside of him. So to now bring in 2 young guys who could potentially learn from Matthew Judon in the right context and who bring their own skill sets to the table, Walker seems to have a good combination of size and speed, and then James Pierce Jr., similar thing off the edge. And again, in a league where teams have revolving doors of edge rushers, you can't necessarily have enough on any given team. The Bucs, after the Seahawks would make their selection of Grey Zebel at the 18th spot, they would go out and get Emeka Egbuka, the Ohio State man. And man, I was kind of shocked by it, but I kind of understood it at the same time. And recognizing that the Bucs are going to be building for the future with a selection like this, they're going to be set. Egbuka gets to learn from Mike Evans and Chris Godwin in one fell swoop. And in the future, he'd be paired up with Jalen McMillan, who had a tremendous rookie season last year. So the Bucs are just continuing to bolster their wide receiver core, continuing to put the right pieces around Baker Mayfield. I mean, hell, like, this shit was so crazy that there was like a report that Baker Mayfield like took Igbuka and his entire family out to lunch or something. Already building the team chemistry off the bat. So you can imagine how this would look like on the field. Igbuka is just a grinder. You know, like he's just got an inability to do a little bit of everything for you. I can't act like he's a burner, but man, he is sure-handed as shit. He can make timely catches at the right time, and we had seen it in multiple games for Ohio State over his entire career there. It's no coincidence that he has the most receptions in school history by the time he got drafted. There's no coincidence to that at all. So he gets to bring that talent, existing talent there, and just get advice, tips from someone who is deniably going to go down as a legend in the game. And Chris Godwin is also a pretty great wide receiver as well. You can't necessarily find yourself in a much better scenario than that. The Broncos would select Jahdae Barron from Texas, and honestly, I thought that they would have gone to select a running back here, because after letting go of Javonte Williams, granted, you probably needed to, but to have Jaleel McLaughlin as your running back number one doesn't necessarily seem like the wisest option in my eyes. But, you know, Jahdae Barron coming out is one of the top cornerback talents in the draft this year. To bring him in a cornerback room that already has Riley Moss and the reigning defensive player of the year in Patrick Surtain II in it is just absolutely insane to think about as well. I mean, if Barron is legitimate, like, dude, we're talking about three just well-rounded corners. Like, and Barron can be versatile as well. So the amount of flexibility that their existing defensive corner or coordinator would have with just placing these guys at any particular position all over the field, that's going to give offenses nightmares, man. It's so true. The Steelers would select Derek Harmon with the 21st overall pick, and I definitely liked it for them. You know, I think they even listed, as I was looking at the depth chart for their roster recently, they had Derek Harmon as a defensive end as well, which I can also see. But granted, again, you're trying to bolster that defensive unit up for the future, because that interior defensive line could definitely use an upgrade, and Harmon, honestly, fills that slot very well. You also have to understand that Cameron Hayward is getting a little bit older as well. He still provides you with great contribution, but the torch is going to have to be passed down at some point, and Harmon could be in line to receive a lot of just mentorship from him as well. One of the better defensive linemen, and honestly, in terms of consistency, one of the most consistent defensive linemen in this last decade or so. Also, too, this pick would be made at a relatively unfortunate time for the man, because shortly after he was selected, his mother ended up passing away, the report would state that he was actually there with her, and she was able to watch him get drafted, but shortly after, she ended up passing away, and that was certainly unfortunate stuff. I already could envision that he would certainly be willing to contribute very well to this team anyways, but I think, obviously, that can definitely take a lot out of you. It feels, though, like Derek Carman, with the way that he has played in some of the Oregon games that I've seen, it feels like he is a player that can truly motivate himself to work his ass off and get things done. I know he's definitely going to continue to make her proud as well. And, it's a situation that he's likely still reeling from now. So you can only just hope for the best from here. And his overall family as well continues to try to, move forward in the most graceful of ways that they truly can. Because it's not easy to just let go of something like that, to be honest with you. The Giants would trade up and get Jackson Dart, as I mentioned. And again, I guess, I can kind of see it, but still, it's like, oh my goodness. The Vikings would also select the Ohio State guard Donovan Jackson. Shout out to Donovan Jackson as well. The Lions would get Tyleik Williams at 28, the Ohio State defensive tackle, to potentially pair him up alongside a player in McNeil that you recently gave a contract extension and who's going to come back healthy. And then you have to mention Aiden Hutchinson coming back healthy on the outside. For a unit that got depleted defensively last season and suffered just some of the absolute worst outcomes as a result, a move like that makes them even stronger, which is pretty crazy to consider. The Chiefs would also take Josh Simmons at the end of the first round from Ohio State. Shout out to him as well. That could be a very good pick for him. I mean, when he was with Ohio State, I did question the consistency a little bit, but he did play well last season. And then unfortunately got hurt in, Ohio State. You could see in a few games at least that they did have some struggles with trying to supplement his play there with other guys to fill in. It was a hard task to fill because he elevated himself in ways that I didn't really envision all that much after he transferred from, I think, San Diego State in 2023. So to go from there and elevate all the way to a first-round pick, get yourself in a position where you're playing for a team who was just in the Super Bowl just a few months ago, even if they didn't lose in the most graceful of ways. I mean, obviously the stats were padded. They got their asses kicked, and a lot of that had to do with the lack of pass protection and the fact that different players were playing out of position just to account for the problem at the tackle position. If Josh Simmons can learn anything from Andy Reid, who had done extensive work with a guy like Eric Fisher, who was drafted first overall in 2013 and ended up becoming one of the more solid offensive tackles in the league over a number of years, Andy Reid certainly knows what he's doing. I'm certain he had a say in this pick, and with his guidance, Simmons will be able to learn a whole hell of a lot. No question about it. The Texans in the second round to start things off would, and I guess I got to tie in their third round pick as well, because obviously they do not necessarily know what is going to happen with Tank Dell. They still have stated to this point that there is just no timeline on his return. And again, with an injury like that, where his entire knee in a number of ways is just out of place completely. The structure down there is completely ruptured. Not only is it going to take a lot of time for that to be put back in place, or potentially replaced with some solid structure that can make that up and get it back on straight, but then he's also going to have to take an extensive amount of time in rehab and physical therapy, being able to simply walk again, and then elevate to potentially running again, all before he even thinks about doing anything revolving around the sport of football. So there's no way to tell. But the Texans, recognizing this and realizing that, they wouldn't even need Christian Kirk there anymore, they offloaded Robert Woods. Nico Collins is the only surefire guy there. So they decided to draft both Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel, the dynamic duo of wide receivers at Iowa State this last season. For them both to be able to run it back in Houston as teammates once more is honestly a pretty cool story. And both of them are pretty fucking good too. Whether you look at their college seasons last year, leading the way with Rocco Becht headlining the show at the quarterback position for their team, or whether you look at how they both performed at the Combine, both of them smashed it. Were some of the best wide receivers in the class in terms of performing there. So I don't see why not. I can definitely like it, man. Like I can get behind those two for sure. The Patriots. Who are the Patriots? Now, I already mentioned that the Browns obviously doubled up on running backs by getting Ohio State man Quinshaw and Judkins, and then Dylan Sampson later in the draft. But obviously here, at 38, the Patriots would get TreVeyon Henderson from Ohio State. The fact that it took this man so long to get off the board is just a crime. Even with Amari and Hampton having better measurables per se and getting drafted to a Chargers team that's already loaded with running backs, this is probably the best fit. This is the best fit of the draft right here when it comes to this particular position. I mean, let's face it. This is nothing necessarily against Ramondre Stevenson, but he had a down year last season. The fumbles kept piling up for this man. The efficiency was not all there. Like, it was just a hell show for him, honestly. Just, obviously, the past couple of years had seen him struggling still, even then. 207 rushes. His second highest total, but just 801 yards. He didn't even get a great amount of yards per carry here at all. Far below league standard. And then, not to mention, 7 fumbles. He had 7 combined fumbles in the 3 years prior. So you can expect that, honestly, they might be starting to have a little less trust in him. For TreVeyon Henderson to come in this situation, being able to do what he can do, whether it is making cuts in open space, just blistering past different players in the secondary for a number of long runs for so much time at Ohio State. Obviously, the home run ability is very natural to him. And then also as a pass blocker and as a pass catcher out of the backfield, he is just a dynamic all-around back. And the Patriots honestly were trying to have something like that with Antonio Gibson, I guess, last season, and that obviously fell through. There is just so much potential with this that you could not pass up the opportunity. So, yup, TreVeyon Henderson is going to absolutely ball out. I can see it already. With the very next pick, the Bears would do something pretty interesting. Now, Luther Burden III probably could have been drafted way earlier, granted. But at the same time, for the Bears to take him, it's a little interesting to me. I don't know. Because you already drafted Rome Odunze last season. You have Keenan Allen still, unless maybe you're willing to move on from him. And honestly, I guess some people kind of believe this as well, but from my own perspective, I do honestly agree that this is the only reason why you would make a selection like this, is if you wanted to just move on from Keenan Allen very soon. And then DJ Moore is still there, obviously. But it's funny, Luther Burden III has gotten comped to DJ Moore. So you want two on the same team? Maybe it can't hurt, but I just, pretty interesting spot to be in if you're honestly the Bears and Luther Burden III in this situation. I'm not gonna lie. Alright. The Cowboys would take Donovan Ejiraku from Boston College. And he had been getting a lot of respect in the mock drafts and all of that. I understand this. At the same time, when you look at who the Colts would get with the very next selection in JT Tuimoloau out of Ohio State. Now again, the Cowboys needed edge rushers no matter how you slice it, and they smartly elected to, just go for lineman options in the first round. Fair enough. Again, it's not to say that Ejiraku might turn out to be a bad player, but I'm looking at what JT Tuimoloau has done at Ohio State and what he can potentially offer your team, and you have a chance to get him and you don't select him. It's a little bit of a head scratcher to me. I'm not gonna lie to you, man. Okay? It's like, come on now. The 47th pick would be very interesting as well. I was talking about how Sean Alexander was essentially passing the torch when he selected Jalen Milroe, or announced the selection of Jalen Milroe at the 92nd overall pick, rather. But this is literal passing of the torch right here. This is the definition of it. Because for this pick, they would call out none other than the recently retired Patrick Peterson to announce the selection. And with that, the Cardinals ended up taking Will Johnson from Michigan. Regarded as potentially, depending on who you ask, the best cornerback prospect in this draft, going to a team that desperately needs cornerbacks. Now, I had discussed this with my brother when I saw this pick be made, but I'm just going to run you guys through this damn cornerback depth chart again for this team prior to them getting Will Johnson, because it was absolutely bad. And to preface it a little bit, anytime I can tell you that at that point, when Sean Murphy Bunting was your best corner on the team, there is a large a huge problem there. Because on this roster, they have Sean Murphy-Bunting, of course. Yes, you now add in Will Johnson. But before that, Jalen Jones, Kytrail Clark, okay, Starling Thomas V, Max Melton, and Elijah Jones. Garrett Williams, Darren Hall, and Jaden Davis. What the fuck? They'll, again, literal fifth string guys, practice squad players, they were rolling out there and expecting to hold their own against other offenses in ball games. No. The scheme, if anything, saved them because there were a few games, like I think the Vikings game, I harken back to that game, they actually held them in check and yet still couldn't get the job done. So that gives you that extra edge. And not to mention, too, later on in the draft, they would actually get Denzel Burke, too. Just bolstering that unit to give you some kind of depth back there. And I mean, Denzel Burke, let's just hope that those guys can get along. Obviously, whenever the Ohio State and Michigan game comes on November 29th, that entire week and maybe the week after ain't gonna see them have too much fun around each other. That is what it is. But if for all other weeks in the football season, y'all can unite and help this roster, this defense, take the monumental surge that it needs, they are gonna be golden. I'm not gonna lie. The Bucs would get Benjamin Morrison, corner from Notre Dame, which is also pretty interesting. I mean, I believe that Jamel Dean is still there, and Tyke Smith had a promising rookie season for them as well as a corner. But outside of that, they also don't have a ton of answers there. They're not as atrocious as the Cardinals unit is, but you would like to have some better pieces in that room to work with. And Benjamin Morrison was a legitimate star at Notre Dame, at least when he was healthy, which probably hurt his draft stock a little bit, the injury history. Still, though, I think this is a pretty good selection here. The Chargers would decide to get Trey Harris, the third wide receiver out of Mississippi. Just a tall human being, straight up. And honestly, for them to lose Josh Palmer in the offseason to the Bills and get back somebody with essentially the same build in Trey Harris III, who can do a lot of similar things and maybe even on a better scale, ain't bad by the Chargers at all. That is not a bad move. The Ravens would decide to get edge rusher Mike Green out of Marshall, a person who was also shooting up draft boards tremendously with his collective performance at the Senior Bowl and other pre-draft processes. And honestly, I can see it. Especially when I saw the one hit. I was late to this, but for him to just power over Josh Connerly Jr. like that, no offensive lineman should be able to just go down like that. Like, that is insane. And this guy fell all the way down to 59, mind you. The Ravens in need of edge rushers that can truly generate sacks. Mike Green seems like the perfect guy for the job. With the 60th overall pick there, the Broncos would get RJ Harvey from UCF. Like, as a 4-year starter, RJ Harvey has obviously accumulated the numbers that would make him ripe to be a potential star in the league. At the same time, he's got a similar frame to Jaleel McLaughlin. And I just don't know how sustainable that this would be in the league with the way that he plays specifically. But as a receiving back, I think he would actually be able to make some noise for that offense. The amount of times they wanted to call all these fucking short rub and screen plays for a guy like Javonte Williams, who is far slower. Even if people believe that RJ Harvey isn't as fast as his 40-yard time suggests, he's way faster, much more versatile than Javonte Williams has honestly ever been. I mean, they expected Javonte Williams to be a beast of a running back coming out of North Carolina when they drafted him. They weren't envisioning him to do much of anything else, and even in terms of being a power back, that didn't necessarily pan out. So, I would say they should use RJ Harvey as a receiving back. I would not trust him to be the workhorse or the engine that carries that running back room. It's just not going to work that way. The Eagles would get Andrew Makuba Sr. from Texas, safety, which makes sense. Again, I did get scared that they were probably going to get a player like Nick Amawori. At the same time, to get Makuba Sr. at that spot, who've been pretty good for Texas over the course of the last few years, is a move that I can get behind. You pair him up alongside Reed Blankenship in that secondary, and he's already going to be a part of a roster that is just continuing, and I mean continuing, to build up defensive. Like, they're literally going to make themselves an unstoppable force on that side of the ball, because earlier in the draft at 31, in a situation where they merely swapped picks with the Chiefs, they got Jahad Campbell, the linebacker edge rusher from Alabama. Then you follow that up by getting Makuba Sr. in the second round, and I've got more to say about the Eagles when I get to their later picks. They will not stop firing their draft capital on these defensive monsters. They want to ensure that they can potentially repeat and not give away the throne again. Honestly, that's how they're playing this thing. It's crazy. With the 69th and 70th overall picks, we'd see wide receivers go back to back. The Patriots would get Kyle Williams out of Washington State, a player who had been pretty low-key, but who had been surging with his overall production at the school and also some of his work at the draft combine. It gives the Patriots a chance to at least continue trying to build or give Drake May weapons. I mean, you have Diggs there right now, and then everything else is uncertain. I mean, you know, they should keep Jalen Polk, of course. You can't necessarily let him go. But, I mean, you haven't utilized Javon Baker at all. So I don't know what the chances for him look like. Kayshon Boutte, that experiment should be over, realistically speaking. Kendrick Bourne, you could probably afford to let him go as well. Cuts are going to have to be made at some point, and the Patriots simply have a lot of decisions to make there. You don't necessarily need the craziest overhaul at that position because, again, not all of these players are necessarily that great. They just were not a good unit overall last season. I will mention, though, they probably could keep Demario Douglas as well. But they have to figure this out, because they're not going to be able to keep that full room before the end of the season. And then the Lions would get Isaac Tesla, wide receiver from Arkansas. Apparently this man is fast as hell. I hadn't heard too much about him. But for the Lions to go and get this man when they already have Jameson Williams just to try to bolster the speed there is crazy. But obviously, the jobs of Jameson Williams and Amon-Ra St. Brown, barring them doing anything stupid, unlike Jameson Williams already got himself into something. But yeah, as long as that doesn't continue, their jobs are safe. I guess I would worry a little bit about Tim Patrick here for the long term if they're willing to get somebody that young, though. With the 72nd overall pick, the Bills would get Landon Jackson, edge rusher from Arkansas. Just gonna be a freak, man. He is going to be a freak. You already have Gregory Rousseau there, who you've given a contract extension this offseason, and who has become one of the best edge rushers / defensive linemen in the league. To get a man in Landon Jackson who's that damn fast at his position, and who is as athletic as he can be. Like, he literally had a fucking 40-inch vertical as a person with his measurables. Then to combine that with the amount of power that he possesses, it's not. It's actually going to be scary if he comes along the right way. I'm telling you right now. Like, oh man. That is actually that would be a scary sight. I'm not going to hold you. With the 83rd overall pick, the Steelers would select Caleb Johnson, the running back out of Iowa. I like it instantly. And in the moment when they drafted him, I thought it was perfect. When I was checking through the Steelers depth chart recently as well, they had Caleb Johnson as the number 2 behind Jaylen Warren. In reality, to test things out in year number 1, they will at least give, a more run by committee or running back by committee system in Pittsburgh to start off the season with those two. Because you at least want to see what you truly have in Caleb Johnson. But I think that he already offers more than Najee Harris can. I mean, the biggest thing is vision and true speed. Coming out of college, graded as being much faster than Najee Harris, and also on multiple runs that he had with Iowa in a few of the games that for whatever reason I had on, he was able to make pretty good reads through different gaps. And it's college, but if that can start early and be maintained in the pros, well, you've already gotten yourself an upgrade if you're the Steelers at this point at that position. And then to continue to have Jaylen Warren as a complementary piece, they're making the right decision there. So I definitely like this move right here. The Packers are going to find themselves in a pretty interesting spot at the wide receiver position as well. Somebody's going to have to get moved. They would get Matthew Golden in the first round. And then they would also get Savion Williams here in the third with the 87th overall pick from TCU. This man is a fucking gadget player. They were using this man at tight end and at the running back position, out of the backfield at TCU. And on at least a few plays per game, he was just a threat from every single one of those positions. It was insane to watch. And now you're bringing that into a system in Green Bay that, they still aren't necessarily sure who their number one guy is. But you have Christian Watson there for speed. Matthew Golden could potentially turn into your number one, but he also offers you a shit ton of speed. You have Jaden Reed as a gadget guy. You have Mecole Hardman Jr. as a gadget guy. You have Romeo Doubs there. You have Dontavion Wicks there. They had Malik Heath playing for a little bit. And now you bring in Savion. There's a lot to work with here. But they're not all going to be able to be a part of this 53-man roster. So that will also be very interesting to follow. But man, it's a pretty good pick, if I do say so myself. The Saints would get Jonas Sanker, safety from Virginia, which is pretty interesting. But at the same time, again, if you can bring in a safety like him, they stated that he could be there for run support, which I guess, given a little bit of what they went through in the highlight package, it seems like that makes sense. And then, again, to have him learn from Tyrann Mathieu. And then also pair up with Justin Reed as well. Okay, the Saints, there could be something to this. But it's not necessarily something that poses a lot of risk at the same time. So, you live with making the decision. The Falcons, though, would get a safety who some might consider to be tons better than Sanker, in Xavier Watts, the safety out of Notre Dame. A person who had been consistently regarded as one of the top players in the secondary, in the nation, at the school. And we saw it on full display the entire college football season last year. So to now have him come in to a system in Atlanta, where you already have Jesse Bates III and Justin Simmons in that safety core. That could be something scary. All I'm going to say is that you better hope that this is not a situation like they had with Richie Grant. They thought he was going to come along well. He was so bad that he got shipped off to the damn 49ers. Do not want to repeat of that at all. If you're them. That's all I'd say about that. Okay. The Giants and Jaguars would do a pair of interesting things. To start out, the Jags at 104 in the fourth round would get Bishal Tootin from Virginia Tech. A smaller running back, but he's definitely got the shifty ability, definitely elusive, and definitely fast. I don't know. I couldn't tell you what that meant for Travis Etienne Jr. at that point in time, and I still can't tell you now. I haven't heard a single thing about his status in that organization, but I'd still be watching for that because I don't know. You have Tank Bixby there still, and they utilize him as a power back to complement Travis Etienne Jr. because the amount of energy it took for Etienne Jr. to consistently be the lead back was tearing him down. He's gone through multiple injuries now, and even when he was healthy last season, it was not on par with any sort of expectations you had for him coming into the year. I mean, to just get as specific as possible here, we're going in year 3. You draft him that high, and you think that he'd be just consistently elevating his game. Instead, after logging 2 1,000-yard campaigns to start off his career, he had just 558 yards on 150 carries in 15 games and just 2 touchdowns. He didn't necessarily contribute a lot out of the backfield either. So it was just a bad all-around season for him. And the team would, not as a direct correlation to that, but they obviously did not have a great overall season. And they're going to be looking to make some changes. So it's very, we are in very murky waters right now when it comes to that situation. But hopefully some clarity is given on that. I would like to know. The Giants would then get Cam Skattebo from Arizona State, running back. Now, it's funny because, the way that Cam Skattebo plays, you would think that he is much bigger than a player like Baishul Tulton. They are both 5'9". Think about that. The way that we saw this man just elevate his physicality down the stretch of that season for Arizona State last year, and then contribute in some of the most well-rounded ways imaginable when they needed to keep their season alive. It was a commendable thing to watch for an individual who in the past few years had been down at Sacramento State as a running back. He made a good transfer at the right time and had a campaign where multiple people were clamoring for him to get the Heisman Trophy. He is another running back who can essentially do a little bit of everything for you. And honestly, with that man putting it all on the line in the CFP first round, that alone showed you just how much effort he is willing to put into the game, into preparing for said game in any other context that you would need him for. There's just no greater tell than that. So it's a solid move for the Giants. Obviously, Tyrone Tracy Jr. had a fine rookie season last year. So I guess they might still utilize him in certain sets, but I would expect Cam Skattebo to take that over a little bit. Obviously, again, first few weeks, they'll probably do a by committee system, but I would expect Skattebo to get that starting job from him by the end of the season. I can see it. The Raiders. Needing a true threat at the wide receiver position after now losing Hunter Renfrow, obviously, and then having, Trey Tucker, Jacoby Myers still, leaves a little to be desired. They would go out at the 108th spot and get Dante Thornton Jr. from Tennessee, the wide receiver. He's definitely got a lankier build, but he is also a burner of a wide receiver with a good amount of size when it comes to height as well. So in a draft where they needed to at least try to bolster that core up, they get a man who stands at 6'4" and who runs that fast. Perfect complement to that offense. He'd be an immediate deep threat for that team. And they were trying to give that role to Trey Tucker at times, I guess. You would probably want Trey Tucker in the slot more. Because honestly, he's not necessarily a bankable name that I would keep around. But at the same time, he has produced. He has produced in some fashion. That's much better than most other people can say for themselves. With the 110th overall pick, the Jets would get another player who is tall as shit and fast as fuck. Arian Smith, the wide receiver from Georgia. In that offense, as a potential number 2 to take the top off the defense, alongside a guy in Garrett Wilson who is an elite route runner with his own brand of speed and elusiveness and just a great ability to just come down with the football. Now, granted, it is pretty crazy that Arian Smith will be 24 years old, essentially, just as soon as the season starts. And honestly, you would like to see him fill out a little bit. For him to just be 179 pounds might be a little detrimental, but he's definitely going to be able to find some form of success in that system. At least that's what the Jets are hoping for, and to get him in the 4th round, too. And then you have the Eagles, man. The Eagles, bro. They would get Ty Robinson, the defensive tackle out of Nebraska. I mean, bro. It is crazy, bro. Like, on a defensive line that already consists of both Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis and Nolan Smith Jr. and now Jahad Campbell, and just through every single position in the front 7, they are deep. And then to just add that on even more and rub that in people's faces, they get a person in Ty Robinson who is 6'5", 288 pounds. It's not fair. It's not fair. They're literally just not going to be able to be moved by any offense out there at this point. We're getting into this territory now. It is insane, man. The Saints would also make a very great defensive pick here by getting Danny Stutzman, the linebacker out of Oklahoma. I believe he was also a 4-year starter as well. And to kind of reinforce that linebacking core in the front 7, knowing that Demario Davis is getting a little older, and also recognizing that you're still reeling just a little bit from losing Zach Bond last year. And then having him go on to finish as a Defensive Player of the Year finalist, you're definitely trying to recoup that. And to have someone who's ready to go on day 1 can't really hurt your chances there. I don't necessarily get this one. The Panthers would take Trevor Etienne from Georgia with the 114th overall pick. I mean, Chuba Hubbard already had the season that he had, but I suppose, like, even now I still don't understand it, but obviously a good number of things have taken place in that Panthers organization, specifically with that running back room that I will get into, not talk about the other news in place. That would open up the door a little bit for Etienne to get some reps this season, but I just still don't necessarily see the vision here. I'm not going to lie to you. The Cardinals, with the 115th overall pick, would take Cody Simon from Ohio State. Shout out to him as one of the strongholds, the anchors of that Ohio State defense. He is definitely proven more than enough to get himself in a good standing in the league. And again, the Cardinals are a defense that needs a lot of retooling overall. I would see him as more of a player who would do well for you in pass coverage and just overall tackling, as he tended to take on those responsibilities relatively well at Ohio State. You have Zaven Collins there already, but you use him more to pass rush, and honestly, that has gone down in a little bit of a controversial way, because there are many other people who believe that he should be utilized much differently, and that you shouldn't necessarily be relying on a guy in Zaven Collins to generate the most sacks on the team for you, which is true. If you have to rely on that, there's definitely going to be a little bit of a problem there. But hey. The Texans would also get Woody Marks from USC, the running back. And again, even they mentioned this a little bit after they made the pick. They essentially said something along the lines of, as expect him to be an elite receiving back. And I agree. His running style is just pretty interesting to look at. It reads like he would just continue to carve up defenses as a receiving back, like he was able to do at USC this season. You had Quentin Joyner offering some of the same things when it came to speed, but they seemed to rely on Marks a lot more when it came to getting those kinds of looks out of the backfield. And even when Joyner, I think there were a couple plays that Joyner got some great looks on his end, it helps that they still had to account for Woody Marks out there, and that naturally freed things up for a guy like Quentin Joyner to do what he did. So, that's definitely understandable. The Falcons would double down on safeties, though, by getting Billy Bowman Jr. from Oklahoma, another safety who has been a really good player in college. Another great pick, and someone who could be used in a versatile manner as well. He's obviously got elite ball skills at the secondary position, and he does a lot of other things pretty well. Oklahoma would certainly understand that. Some of the few games they won this season were off the backs of the combined efforts of Stutzman and Bowman Jr. on that defensive front alone. So I think it's a smart pick for the Falcons. I mean, they have one of the stronger overall drafts. And it helps that they were able to double up on a few key positions. But yes, okay, so I'm looking at this now, and honestly, it makes sense. Because Justin Simmons has remained unsigned with any team right now. They don't necessarily know if Justin Simmons would come back, and even he stated that he might want to go elsewhere. He voiced recently, according to a few reports I'm seeing here, that he wanted to join the Eagles. So he may no longer be a Falcon. And again, to pair either one of those safeties up at any given time, you could even deploy 3 safety sets if you wanted to be that toxic, and have all 3 of those guys playing together with Bowman Jr. and also Xavier Watts being able to learn from Jesse Bates III. It's insane. That is legitimately going to be unfair if that develops well. The Titans at 120 would select Gunnar Helm, tight end from Texas. They already have Chigotse Okonkwo, and Helm has been regarded as one of the better tight ends in college football. He's been utilized a ton as a wide receiver. I'm sure that the Titans would be willing to do the same thing. So, I mean, does that really mean anything for Chigotse Okonkwo? Are you going to keep him around? Or are you going to move on from him? The Panthers at 122 would select Lathan Ransom, the Ohio State man. Safety. Absolutely love it. You already have secured J.C. Horn for the long term, but your safety positions still leave a little bit to be desired. And what better way to do that than to find a potential gem late in Lathan Ransom, who, honestly, when it comes to being able to operate in the box, bro, he was a monster up front for the Buckeyes over his time there. Could he be deployed in the same ways in Carolina? Sure. But hey, he's definitely going to be a star in his role. Back-to-back Ohio State picks, though, as with the 123rd overall pick, the Steelers would select Jack Sawyer out of Ohio State. I was very surprised to see him take that tumble down the draft boards. Man has been one of the more elite edge rushers in the nation. Even with all of these other edge rushers getting so much hype around their names, Jack Sawyer has been elite every single year he's been in college. And again, you bring him into a system where you already drafted Derek Harmon, as I mentioned earlier, but now you're going to potentially have him in some sets lining up opposite of TJ Watt. What in the fuck? Like, that's, bro. I can't even fathom it right now. Oh my goodness. The Jets would also get themselves another pretty interesting steal of a player with the 130th overall pick, getting Malachi Moore, my namesake, in safety out of Alabama. This could go down as a very good move, truly. I'm not going to lie to you. Now, granted, he's going to come in as a 24-year-old, so he's a little older, but given how depleted the Jets secondary is right now, I mean, there's no way you still trust Chuck Clark back there. So to bring in someone in Malachi Moore, who has proven to be very well-rounded at his position, yeah, I certainly like those odds with this one. The Titans would also double up on wide receivers in this stretch, because after starting off the round by getting Chimere Dike out of Florida, they would get close to ending it off with the 136th pick by getting Elikyle Minor from Stanford. Yes, everybody, as soon as they heard the name, harkened back to that Colorado-Stanford match in 2023, where he just went nuclear across on that entire team, and also mossed Travis Hunter for the record. But no, legitimately, he's been one of the few bright spots that Stanford has had over these last few years, to be completely honest with you. And he could come right in as a potential number 2 option. I would expect them to move Chimere Dike to the slot in that instance then. And honestly, with them doing that, I like both picks, by the way. I think they could come in and contribute very nicely. Okay, so yeah, here I guess they're saying that they have declined the 5th-year option on Treylon Burks, and that I guess people in the organization are hoping for him to step up in light of that. I don't know how likely it is, but I guess, with them formally making the move to not guarantee him that, this is his final chance. It's definitely going to be a competition at the wide receiver position. A very deep one. Obviously, Calvin Ridley is the only player that's really secure here. But yeah, Treylon Burks, you're going to have to get it together, because those two guys could come in and easily take over your spot to where you're not even a part of the Titans anymore. So, this is certainly his last chance. With the 138th overall pick, the 49ers would get Jordan Watkins, the wide receiver out of Ole Miss. A smaller build, but one that also makes sense for you to already have Ricky Pearsall there. You've let go of Deebo Samuel Sr. at this point. You're on the path to let Brandon Ayuk go as well. So it's about rebuilding that roster, at least that core, and Jordan Watkins could be a very good slot piece. It's essentially the role he served at Ole Miss. He fucking killed it with Jackson Dart last season. Like, he had like a historic game with Ole Miss too. And in that offense, alongside some other capable number one receivers, we're looking at a player in Jordan Watkins who could truly be a huge benefit to that team. Okay. With the 148th overall pick, the Rams would select Ty Hamilton out of Ohio State. And they are also in a spot to continue to bolster that unit. I mean, granted, Jarrett Verse serves as an overall edge rusher and defensive end, but to have gotten Braden Fisk alongside him as a defensive tackle, and I guess sometimes defensive end if you want to place him there, and then now add Ty Hamilton in the mix. Again, another person who had been nothing but an anchor on that Ohio State team for that long. That could very well pay off for them. The Cowboys would select Jaden Blue, the running back out of Texas. Again, they decided to go elsewhere with a lot of their earlier picks. Doesn't seem like Jaden Blue is a bad fit for this organization. I mean, he's literally coming off of attending the University of Texas at Austin, not too far away from Dallas. So he's going to be right at home. They just need to be able to run good game plans because their staff leaves little to be desired right now when it comes to the running backs coach and the offensive lines coach. Like, bruh, even with Jaden Blue showing some promise, like, if they don't get on their shit, it's not going to work out. Straight up. The Eagles would then, again, their front seven is so fucking deep, and even when you look at their entire defense, they have so many fucking Georgia Bulldogs on that roster already. So what do they decide to do with the 161st overall pick? They get Smael Mondon Jr. out of Georgia. A person who, again, went through a slide. Most likely due to a hindrance in overall production. He also had a little bit of legal trouble, I think, as well. I could be wrong. But, bro, the talent that this man has is still so damn existent. The potential is very high for him. And he still gets to be a part of a roster that has some of his former teammates there already. There's already going to be chemistry there with those guys. The defense is already on 10, and they just keep adding more pieces. It's unfair. It is insane to think about, man. There's just no way that's real. The Panthers, with the 163rd overall pick, would get Mitchell Evans, tight end out of Notre Dame. Tommy Tremble, ironically enough, was drafted by the Panthers out of Notre Dame. They serve the same role. Do they expect Mitchell Evans to be a blocker or something? That's the only reason I can see them making a move like this. Tommy Tremble is not necessarily the best tight end in the world, but he's at least been serviceable enough for that team. Though, you know what? Jadeveon Sanders as well. Jadeveon Sanders should be coming back healthy. I mean, if they have more faith in him, we're going to have to see about the first couple of games then. Because they were letting Jadaveon Sanders go pretty crazy out there for them prior to his injury. And then obviously Trimble took back over. So, I mean, we're going to have to see. If they don't express that kind of trust in Trimble, that is how I will know that things are looking a little bit bleak for him. But it's really hard to say right now. With the 164th pick, the Steelers would get Yaya Black, D tackle out of Iowa. Definitely going to have experience with playing on that side of the football frequently, given just how many possessions he had to see the field in every single given Iowa game last season. But that's besides the point. Just another one, another potentially good defensive tackle option to build for the future. Another smart move by the Steelers in yet another situation where we have a team just pairing up, or doubling up on a given position. Definitely works for them here. The Chargers at 165 will get Oronde Gadsden the second, tight end out of Syracuse. Honestly, I thought he would have been drafted a little earlier as well, being regarded as one of the better tight ends in all of college football. But for him to fall here and recognizing that at tight end, their only guy right now is Will Dissly, and honestly, they might not be content enough with that. I think a person like Oronde Gadsden II could serve as a legitimate receiving threat that they might have needed for the longest time now. I mean, you can think back to, years ago. We're not necessarily considering guys like Hayden Hurst won. Will Dissly had a fine receiving season last year, but he's still not necessarily considered to be a threat. Donald Parham Jr. was there. He's gone now. He would have been a monster being a damn 6'8" tight end with the ability to catch the football, but things did not go well with him on this team at all. So they've been needing a player like that for some time. And that could honestly go down as a potential steal for them in this kind of offense that they are going to be running. At 170, after the Bills selected the fastest corner in the draft in Maxwell Hairston in the first round, they would also double up on cornerbacks after letting go of Kyer Elam, obviously, by getting none other than Ohio State man Jordan Hancock. Now, obviously, they're also going to have Tre'Davious White in there, but again, a short-term deal for him. I don't know why they keep on doing this with him. If you're not going to keep him around long-term, I don't necessarily see the point. Nonetheless, in terms of building for the future, the Bills are certainly on the path to do the right thing. And I would definitely love to see Jordan Hancock come along as a potentially serviceable cornerback in the league. All right. Yes, to start out round 6. Oh boy. The Dolphins would do something pretty fucking interesting, in my opinion. They would get Ollie Gordon, the second running back out of Oklahoma State. Now, yes, he had a down season last year, but let's be honest, that entire roster fucked up Mike Gundy's whole shit, dog. It was a terrible season for them through and through. And just as an aside, you know what? I need to see about this right now because, yes, please tell me that they have found a different quarterback right now. I just need to check this right now because I know that Alan Bowman even said he would probably just give it up at this point. So he's obviously not there anymore. Please tell me they have found somebody. I need to figure this out right now because it is actually it would be great if they got a really good quarterback after all this time, bro. Alan Bowman was so damn inconsistent that they had to lean on the backup, and then even the backup ended up tailing off to where they had to throw Alan Bowman back in, only for him to just continue to be terrible. So man, I'm really trying to figure this out. Do they have one? Please tell me they have one. I'm not worried about fucking searching up damn Oklahoma State quarterback. They talking about fucking Brandon Weeden. Ain't nobody been thinking about Brandon Weeden for years. Oh, well, they had a backup quarterback that transferred to an SEC school, I guess Ole Miss. They got to figure that out real soon because, bro, they need to get back on track. But anyways, as for Ollie Gordon II, this man, just a couple of years ago, was considered one of the best running backs in college football, and even in what was a down year in production, he maintained that level of excellence despite being on a terrible football team. So to bring him in as a change of pace running back, because that's exactly what he's going to be with this offense. And honestly, he should be, because it's about time that the Dolphins stop relying so much on their speed. Even though Gordon II can do that, they need to try to get more physicality on their roster. And honestly, there aren't too many more optimal ways to do that than by starting at the running back position. Obviously, that goes hand in hand with how they continue to build up their offensive line, because that needs a massive upgrade as well. They were one of the worst rushing units in the league last season. De'Von Achane, who had a tremendous rookie season, he still had an opportunity to have a all-rounded season when it came to doing bits and pieces of damage in the rushing and receiving attack. But when it came to purely running the football, no lanes were existent for this man all season long. He was getting stopped early on so many of his carries to where he just had a terrible season overall from that front. Raheem Mostert also suffered. Even Jalen Wright, who was brought in to be another speed demon, could not necessarily make that happen with the lackluster blocking from that unit. So it all starts there. But to have Achane and Gordon II running the show there should be pretty fun once they get all of this sorted out. I'm not going to lie to you. I like it. With the 181st overall pick, the Eagles would select Kyle McCord out of Syracuse, the former Ohio State man as well. Obviously, people were getting confused a little bit, like he's going to be a backup, but he's going to be a priority backup, given the way he played at Syracuse last season, considered to be one of the best quarterbacks in college football with the year that he had. And his accolades were well-deserved in that situation. It's going to be as simple as that. With the 182nd overall pick, the Patriots would do something pretty interesting in drafting a kicker, Andres Bergalis, out of Miami. Now, I was initially confused about it a little bit because I'm like, okay, I just got to look up who exactly this Bergalis guy is. It's safe to say that he's definitely going to perform well for this team. Now, obviously, there's a difference between kicking in college and kicking in the pros, but he has been elite his entire career at Miami, especially from distance. I mean, when we're getting into the 40 and 50-yard ranges, he's one of the best in college football for years now when it comes to making field goals on an efficient rate from there. So for a team that had a kicker in Joey Sly miss a 24-yard field goal last season, yes, they definitely need someone who is guaranteed to at least make his field goals efficiently. Also, they don't have Joey Sly anymore. So the kicker position is wide open, and Andres Bargas will fit right in. The Saints would, with the 184th pick, get Devin Neal, running back out of Kansas. Also, another 4-year player who accumulated massive numbers at Kansas at the running back position as one of the most consistent at his position in college football over the past few years. And to have him in with Alvin Kamara is honestly a little interesting to me. I mean, it really just depends on how you view Alvin Kamara at this point. You're still indebted to him a little bit because he's still getting paid a contract from him, or from that team. But let's be honest, he did struggle last season overall. That could be a testament to the entire offense, or that could be a sign of regression. I guess, with bringing a guy in Devin Neal that could at least take off the amount of burn that Kamara gets. Because that could honestly be it as well. I mean, Alvin Kamara, though it hasn't necessarily been rewarded with team success, has been one of the most versatile running backs in the league, especially at his peak. There's no doubt about it. Consistently over his career, especially when you look at his first 5 seasons. All the time. And, efficiency and volume just peaked into such high territory that it burned him out a little bit. And you could tell, even with him playing 14 games, these weren't necessarily the strongest outputs on a week-to-week basis. If Devin Neal can take off that load even a little bit and allow Alvin Kamara to at least, get rejuvenated, maybe re-enter that kind of form that he had even in 2021, the Saints could be dangerous on that front this season. And then with the 185th overall pick, the Steelers would double up on Ohio State men, bringing in none other than Will Howard, the world-famous quarterback, the captain of the ship that sailed last year's Ohio State squad into national championship winning territory. I think that, honestly, you might still try to get a quarterback who is a little older. They could still be seeking out Aaron Rodgers, and honestly, that situation is just a whirlwind in and of itself. We don't know. There has been no update whatsoever. But if the season were to start today and you were to have to go with Will Howard, I wouldn't bat an eye at that. Not even a matter of bias. I would not bat an eye at that whatsoever. I mean, even if he wasn't necessarily well respected as a high-end quarterback over the course of his entire college career, what we can't deny is that his last season at Ohio State was elite and had all the markings of an individual who is pro-ready and capable of leading an NFL roster to relative success. Now, I'm not going to act like he's going to come into Pittsburgh and automatically win a Super Bowl with them. That's just unrealistic. But he will certainly be able to get them into playoff territory, at least in true playoff contention, in the right situation. They already have been in playoff contention as well. The problem is that they just keep limping into it, keep meddling into it, settling for records just barely above 500 and then getting first rounded. So there's obviously going to have to be an elevation of play accounted for in those moments. But having Will Howard in there with his accuracy, and at least at Ohio State, we saw him become a little bit more consistent, a little more calculated in his decision making, because at Kansas State that was certainly not the case. He was very inconsistent and a very errant passer of the football, trying to force everything down the field. He did do it a few times at Ohio State, but that necessarily was not really a part of his playing last season. You got to credit him for being able to kind of weed that out. And then also, obviously Ohio State runs such a great offensive system all the time, to where Chip Kelly is now the Raiders' offensive coordinator. That definitely helped massively. I can't act like it didn't. But the potential is there to at least fit the mold of a very respectable starter in the NFL. And again, Jack Sawyer and Will Howard are now teammates again. And to put the icing on the cake, Will Howard is from Pennsylvania. Now, the exact city, I can't necessarily say that I am certain of whether or not it is closer to Pittsburgh or Philadelphia, but he is a hometown kid through and through. Makes it even sweeter. With the 186th overall pick, the Ravens would controversially select Tyler Loop, kicker out of Arizona. Again, the same thing. I was questioning it. Is he necessarily good enough to be drafted? You rarely see two kickers get drafted in the same round, even if it is this late. And again, same thing. His efficiency did leave a little bit to be desired, but at the same time, every single year saw him elevate from range. And if you can get that done in college, chances are you're going to be a well-respected kicker in some capacity in the NFL. Also, given how the situation is, and honestly, as I'll detail when I get around to talking about all the other developments, this ended up being ideal for the Ravens in so many capacities. With the 189th overall pick, the Colts would get Riley Leonard for some reason. I still, to this point, I don't know about it. I just don't. I mean, we're talking about yet another quarterback on that roster who is from Duke, because obviously, Riley Leonard spent the last season at Notre Dame. He originally was at Duke and then transferred. And ironically enough, when you really look into it, Riley Leonard and Daniel Jones are the same fucking player. They are one and the same. They are tall, they are lanky, and they fit the prototypical quarterback build when it comes to their measurables. At the same time, both of them have their problems with accuracy, and they are both elite at running the football. That is their core strength as quarterbacks. Why do you need two of the same player in the same quarterback room? And then not to mention, you have Anthony Richardson there too. Like, this is literally going to be one of the... We think the Browns are in trouble with their quarterback room. The Colts are about to have quite the situation for themselves at this point. Because I don't know how the fuck you can possibly try to have 3 different quarterbacks on a roster who cannot necessarily throw the ball efficiently. But I mean, if things with both Richardson and Jones fall through, which honestly does seem very likely to happen, as terrible as that is to say, there is a world in which both of them do not produce well for the team and get moved on from in just a span of a year or so. So there's a world where Riley Leonard could enter a future season as a potential Colts starter, but man, he is kind of raw when it comes to being a thrower of the football. And if he wants to be able to last in the NFL, my goodness, he is going to need a tremendous amount of work. There were games last season where, yes, you did see flashes of an improved Riley Leonard from that front, but he still had games where this man was throwing just around like 40% from the field. But granted, with how strong the rushing attack was and how strong Notre Dame's defense was, it didn't matter because they would still thrash the fuck out of teams and win some close games. It's about getting more consistent. And then, I talk about consistency, and then we move on with the 197th overall pick. The Texans getting Graham Mertz, quarterback from Florida and Wisconsin, the model of inconsistency. Now, obviously, he's going to be a backup too, but, I'm like, Quinn Ewers is still on the board, and you draft Graham Mertz over him? I mean, again, Quinn Ewers is better. There's still not necessarily going to be a threat at that point to take over the starting spot from C.J. Stroud, but it's like, you just have to be real with yourself here. Do you really think Graham Mertz is going to do anything in this league? I don't think so, especially being in this position, and especially with what I'm seeing from him in college. I'm just not convinced. Like, I don't care about his accuracy numbers from last season. I don't give a shit. They are not going to fool me with that. He is not good. I'm not going to expect too much from him at all, even with him just being a backup. I just got to be frank about that. There is no shot in hell that happens. Straight up. The Commanders at 205 would get Kyle Medrano from UCLA, one of the better performing linebackers in the combine. But I guess teams did see that, I guess, they would like to, invest in other players ahead of him. At the same time, I guess it was interesting because his teammate in Carson Schweschinger got drafted by the Browns at 33. So you mean to tell me a player who maybe isn't as safe as he was, but who appears to be much better when looking at the film on Medrano falling all the way down like that? I don't know about that. And honestly, that kind of patience of the Commanders to just see how that would fare and then nab them at 205, that could pay off for them in the long run. I don't know. I mean, again, you're not hoping for a repeat of Jamin Davis, but this comes with a lot less risk, obviously, getting him all the way at nearly the end of the 6th round. With the 208th pick, the Panthers would select Jimmy Horn Jr. out of Colorado immediately. Even with everything that has gone down with Hunter Renfrow to this point. He is another player that can serve as a great slot receiver. He had done so at Colorado. And he can bring the same skill set to Carolina easily. Canales is a smart offensive mind, so they could potentially have something there. Oh yeah, I guess I would have brought this up in the later developments, but I may as well just talk about it here since we're coming up on it. With the 213th pick, the Raiders would select none other than Tommy Mellott, wide receiver from Montana State. First of all, first thing that hit my mind when thinking about this is that who and from where? You're trusting a wide receiver out of Montana State? There were still some other very capable wide receivers on the board, so I didn't understand it at the time, and I still don't. But then the Raiders would do something really interesting because they would come out and say that they were willing to use him in pretty much any offensive skill position imaginable. And then I'm like, well, okay, I need to try and figure out who exactly this dude is because what the fuck? So apparently at Montana State, even though he's listed as a wide receiver, he did occupy a good number of snaps at the quarterback position, at the running back position, and even a little bit at the tight end position, interestingly enough. And he produced well from every single one of those positions over the course of the years, logging career highs in overall passing at Montana State last season, and then being a great runner of the football as well. But I'm like, dude, hold on. So they really think that instead of having someone as surefire as Hunter Renfrow was for you, you're now going to deploy a guy out there who you think is going to be the next Taysom Hill, essentially. If you're going to have him occupying all of those different slots on the field at different points of time. So I guess I would expect to see him in on certain, wildcat snaps for the team. I mean, it's not like Geno Smith's a bad runner of the football at all, obviously. But I guess if they want him in on some run plays, just to have fresh legs in there and just youthful energy, you'll have Mellott in. They would also then at 215 just continue to double down on this notion of just getting some quarterbacks in there to deploy at just random points in the ball game by getting North Dakota State's Cam Miller. Now, obviously, yes, he had a great showing against Colorado. And obviously, as a part of North Dakota State, obviously we're talking about one of the more accomplished FCS schools out there when it comes to college football. There's no denying that. At the same time, again, if you are the Raiders, Quinn Ewers is still on the board, and you choose to have Cam Miller there, I just don't see the vision in that. Obviously, this is not a quarterback-heavy draft class, and they might be willing to, in later years, look for the next franchise guy when the class becomes stronger. But it's like, dude, I don't know. If you're running on that logic, then what the hell do you think Cam Miller is going to do for you, honestly, that Quinn Ewers could not? It's like, I'm trying my hardest to figure that out, and I still don't have the answer to that question. It's just really weird to see. But, okay. All right. let's just say with the 227th overall pick in the draft, the 49ers thought that they were trying to be slick. They would select Curtis Rourke, the quarterback out of Indiana. And granted, he had a great season last year. But prior to that, his career has been rife with injuries. And even then, why exactly are you drafting him here? Because he'd be your primary backup. And I guess you're thinking for whatever reason that he showed flashes of promise last season to where he might usurp your current starter. It doesn't make sense. I mean, even if Brock Purdy had a down season last year, bruh, that man is still balling the fuck out. Like, this is still a player who was literally the last pick in the draft and has led you near the promised land. I understand that the 49ers, honestly, in a lot of the overall decisions that they've been making for the last couple of postseasons now have been dictated by their ability or lack thereof to try and build a capable enough team to truly capitalize on the opportunity of winning a championship before they had to invest deeply in Brock Purdy. And again, yes, the quarterback market is certainly inflated now to where he could legitimately get any number of money when it comes to an overall contract. But at the same time, this isn't the way to operate. And I'm a Seahawks fan saying this to the 49ers brass. Like, yo, this ain't the way to handle this situation. Don't be a bunch of fucking bitches about this shit. Pay the man, bro. He's done nothing but produce for you since he's been there. Like, yes, there is a question to ask of whether or not he can be truly elite enough to put you over the top. But he has already gotten near there. And with the current state of quarterbacks, you're not necessarily going to find much better than you've already got. Pony up. Pay that man. Don't do that shit by getting a player in Curtis Rourke who, just because he had a good season in Indiana last season, maybe he can take over for Brock Purdy someday so that we don't have to pay him. No, you're going to do exactly what it is that you need to do. It might cost you, but this is what you get necessarily. That's exactly what you get by not being able to win a championship. The production does not lie. He is deserving of a contract, and he should be given his. Very fucking soon. Because, honestly, the longer you continue to wait and see how the market fluctuates and moves around, you might even potentially have to pay him more than what you are currently willing to do so. So I'd make that move as soon as possible. Even if he's not necessarily considered to be the best of the best, he is damn good enough to get his damn money right now. The Dolphins would interestingly select Quinn Ewers at the 231st overall pick of the draft. Obviously, he'd come in as a backup, but honestly, again, yes, granted, after being relegated to years now of Skylar Thompson, of Mike White for a little bit of time, of Tyler Huntley, you need a capable backup because outside of maybe just one game if you're looking at Mike White, and virtually nothing from those other two, you have just been given shit at that position whenever Tua Tagovailoa has been out with injury. Quinn Ewers, being a highly touted quarterback when it came to being a starter at Texas last season, obviously comes in with a tremendous amount of value at the backup position. So, you obviously want Tua Tagovailoa to be as healthy as possible, but if he cannot be, and he has to miss time, if you get him involved in the right way, Quinn Ewers could be able to step in and take on the load in a smooth way. That's really all you're hoping for by making a move like this. So I totally get this one, even if it is a little interesting. The Jags would also, after getting by Schultuten in the top of the fourth, at 236, they would get Quinn Allen Jr., a running back from Syracuse. Another player who had been pretty well-rounded. All I had to do was watch one game from this man. I think it was Syracuse's bowl match, and he alone, with his contributions, led them to that victory over, I believe it was Washington State. Single-handedly dominated that game. And that must have been a testament to how he had been playing for a good portion of time during his college career there. But that also, again, even though we haven't heard any news since then, with them making that move at the time, that just confirmed to me that somebody's gone. And it seems to be, again, it just looks more and more like it will be Travis Etienne Jr. on his way out. But this is merely speculation. We have no clarity on that right now. So it's going to be, again, heavily important to see how that goes. But in the event that they do, they've gotten a pair of very solid running backs to pick up the slack in the future. You will just hope that it parlays into some form of success, especially compared to how last season went. The Cowboys would get Phil Mafah, running back from Clemson. As I've been saying since they drafted it, this ain't it. This ain't the one, man. This ain't the one. Now, if we're talking about Phil Mafah in seasons past, sure, he had been a pretty good running back at Clemson for that time. But last year, his decision to stay another season there might have honestly been one of the worst possible decisions he could have made because he did not perform, especially down the stretch. There were a number of games where they had to put in one of their backup running backs to take over because he just became unplayable. He was so inefficient. It was hard to watch some of these games that Clemson played. I'm telling you, bro. Hold up. Again, they were great. But, okay. Well, okay, that is pretty interesting. I guess they're saying here that he had career high output when it came to rushing, and yet still it felt like down the stretch, as Clemson was trying to make this run, he had some of the worst possible performances he could have had, especially when we're looking at a running back who, as a senior, did that kind of damage. You would expect way more from him in the biggest games of the season, and he crumbled. It was not easy to watch that. And that was a direct reason for why Clemson ended up losing out here. That was just... So I don't know. I guess the production isn't necessarily anything to like just scoff at, but at the same time, when you look deeper into some of the games that led up to their end of the season, they just were not good performances. But again, for him to be drafted in the 7th round, there's not a lot of risk that goes into that. So, I guess if he doesn't pan out, the Cowboys aren't necessarily missing out on much anyways. But it just adds even more intrigue in the worst possible way to a running back room mired in, I can't even call it mediocrity with Miles Sanders and Javonte Williams there. But again, at least Jaden Blue offers a little bit of hope, I guess. Man, it's crazy. And alright, those are all the developments I'll be getting into in the draft. And as I said, that wasn't necessarily every single pick that took place here. But again, a lot of pretty intriguing things happened. And so, pretty cool to just take time out and just get all of that in. But for some other developments here, Elijah Moore would sign a 1-year, $5 million deal with the Bills, with them already having Khalil Shakir be extended, with them bringing in Josh Palmer. They might expect Elijah Moore on a few occasions to fill the slot role. I believe that they still want to try to make something out of Keon Coleman. So I don't necessarily think that he's going to get as much reps compared to what he was doing in Cleveland. This is a much better team. Simply put, it's a good position to be in if you're Elijah Moore because, I guess he had to get his worth up in some way. Even when he was with the Jets, he wasn't necessarily producing on the same accord as he was with Cleveland just last year. So he had to get his value back up, and he parlayed that into getting at least a short-term deal with a team in prime position to potentially win a championship if they can just overcome their kryptonite in the Chiefs. You gotta give Elijah Moore credit for that, but I just don't know how many opportunities he'll really get with the team. In some other news, Jeff Sperbeck, the former agent of John Elway, would pass away at the age of 62 last month. He had suffered an injury while at a golf resort. And as a result of those injuries, it would lead to his death, unfortunately. Definitely a hard situation to really think about if you're a family member of his, if you're a loved one of his, if you're relatively close with him at that point. It's just, definitely a sad moment to hear about. And again, you're just hoping that still, again, yet another case where while it can be hard to move forward in a situation like that, you're hoping that they can do so and continue to just be there for each other in that moment because they will most certainly have to lean on one another at that point in time. No way around it. The Ravens would sign Joe Noteboom, the offensive tackle, via the Rams. He will be joining them now. I guess as a depth piece, that probably makes sense. I don't even think the Ravens are in desperate need for a tackle, but at the same time, if you can get an upgrade over the route that guys like Morgan Moses put on y'all, then yeah, you will take it. You'll take it, Devin Bush was arrested on simple assault and harassment charges. Nothing else has come out about it since then. I read the report earlier There hasn't been any clarity on it. We don't necessarily know what's going to happen with him, but it's just like, dude, Devin Bush is not necessarily, again, this ain't stuff that any player should be doing in the first place anyways. I don't say this to like kind of promote that at all. You should not be doing anything like this, generally speaking. If you're any player, any person, fuck it. But Devin Bush, with the way that his career has gone, is in no position to get himself in situations like this. The fact that he continues to get chance after chance after chance with his relatively subpar play on the field is a miracle in and of itself. You don't seriously want to waste another opportunity with a team simply because of something like this. So that shit gotta stop. That's what I'll say about this. There's no way that should be going down. Because again, you look at what else has gone down with players that have gotten themselves involved in SA and harassment type beats. Now it's put a player in free agency and potentially, if things go a certain way, out of the league for good. As the Ravens, they would call this a football decision and release Justin Tucker. Shockingly enough, the most prolific kicker in NFL history. Yes, multiple people in the country, around the world, they regard him as the greatest kicker of all time. Out. Just like that. And we all know why that is. We all know why that is. Now, apparently it had been brought to my attention that he would take up a massive amount of cap space for a kicker. And in that case, again, you can get the element of a football decision from that. But ultimately, this comes down to all the off the field issues that he has been dealing with. This is what it comes down to. I can guarantee you right now, if he was not dealing with that stuff off the field, even with him having a terrible year last season, he would still be there to serve as a mentor to Tyler Loop. But with all that extra attention being focused on that, and with the Ravens trying to refocus, trying to get themselves in position to potentially secure a championship game appearance and then potentially a Super Bowl. They don't have time for that shit. Even if it is going to have to come with, cutting ties with a franchise guy for the last 13 years for your squad. Because at that point, no one player is above the team. And if you're going to bring all that extra baggage along, that just brings on distractions that a team in that position simply doesn't need. The 2027 NFL Draft is set to be in Washington, D.C. They're going to have it at the National Mall in Washington, D.C., near where the National Monument is. Or where the Washington Monument is, rather. So that should be pretty interesting. They've just got to make sure that all of the security measures are on straight right there. And they should be good. Obviously, this will come after next year's draft, where it will be held in Pittsburgh, of course. The Steelers would make a very interesting trade. They would send George Pickens away and a 2026 sixth-rounder as well to the Cowboys in exchange for a 2026 third-rounder and a 2027 fifth-rounder. I guess it makes sense. So I guess that ends the notion of Pickens and Metcalf just going to war. But I guess that specific concept was a fun little narrative to run along with while it lasted. I guess the Steelers were just not game to dealing with that shit. Because again, in reality, if they're both going to act that way, it could be a nightmare for a locker room to go through dealing with wide receivers who have similar mannerisms on opposite sides of the field at one given time. And it was already hard enough to deal with one in George Pickens, to the point where I don't know. Like, even with all the PR work being done to try to make him out to be a well-respected player in the organization, I don't necessarily think that everything that has taken place over just the last season between him and the team as a whole suggests that there was a mutual feeling of respect there. I can't necessarily look at all of the developments I saw last season and say that that's the case. And again, with bringing him into the Cowboys, hey, for the Cowboys at least, in theory, it's a great trade. A hell of an upgrade over Brandon Cooks, by far. And it could make that wide receiver core very deadly. At the same time, CeeDee Lamb is also an individual that demands the ball. Now, do I necessarily consider him to be a diva? Teach their own. He could be considered one for sure. So that is another situation that they're going to have to hash out before we even get into the meat of the football season. Because there's just no way that if you don't find a way to manage this, that those two can coexist. Or even become the best of friends in some hopeful situation. Like, there's no way to suggest that right now. So it's definitely going to take some work. That would be a pipe dream if they could become good friends. It's not impossible. It's just not going to be an easy process. But they need to be willing to have those growing pains. Especially if they want George Pickens to be able to come through and be that complementary piece. And a huge upgrade for that entire core. The Jags, on the other hand, would release Gabe Davis yesterday. So, with that being said, as I stated earlier in the video, that just gives Hunter all the room in the world to become a great number 2 option alongside Brian Thomas Jr. All the room. Even if you're looking at like Parker Washington, for example, he was getting looks at the slot position, and honestly, his role with Gabe Davis being out might increase. I would believe that it can. So, hey, that could be interesting. Very interesting. The Eagles would work with Dallas Goedert to where they both agreed on the restructuring of his contract for the next season to at least keep him through the end of this year. Makes sense. You got to do as best as you can to keep that core together. Obviously, they lost some guys, but Dallas Goedert was a key piece. So you're definitely going to try to express some kind of loyalty to him and retain his services. The Rams would state that they would hold a mandatory minicamp in Hawaii to bring a promotion of tourism to the city of Maui, which is a very respectable thing to do. Obviously, the Rams have several connections with just the general area due to the amount of Polynesian players that they have on their roster, namely Puka Nakua. So I definitely think it makes sense from that perspective. It helps both teams, or well, helps both sides in that instance, being able to bring all of that attention to Maui in the first place. And then also giving the Rams a place to be able to conduct these workouts because they've got to be done. Obviously, they're mandatory. We have to keep in mind with this that they still do not have a training facility in their own area right now as well, which is why they had to move somewhere. I mean, obviously, going to Maui, it just goes hand in hand with their goal overall, but they had to find somewhere to work out because their facility in Los Angeles is still in rubble after the wildfires that took place earlier this year. They haven't been rebuilt at all. I have yet to really see an image of what things look like, but I have to imagine that, you're trying your hardest to do a full scale rebuild of that entire area. And you're probably going to be focusing on a lot of other essential locations like schools, community centers were burned down, and they've got to figure out a way to get those rebuilt. I think like senior homes and residences were burned down to an extent. You're going to be focusing on those as well. Stores and other essential businesses to different neighborhoods in that area have to be restored first. Obviously, football is a massive brand and a massive sport, but in the context of what that entire area of the city had to go through and how they were ravaged just completely. A training facility for a sport is going to be the last thing on people's minds when it comes to things that need to be renovated. We're looking at priorities here. The training facility is just not going to be it. So I can't imagine that they've gotten around to it yet, to be completely honest with you. And that is fine. But that gives the Rams no choice but to find another location. And I guess with what they are planning to do, going to Hawaii can't be all bad. The Panthers would do a couple of things today. They would release Jadeveon Clowney. There was a report that they were set to do so, and honestly, it makes sense with the direction that they're headed in. Jadeveon Clowney didn't necessarily do a lot with the team last season anyways, so he wouldn't necessarily be a player that you were just hell-bent on retaining. And I don't know with Jadeveon Clowney. I mean, again, a player who had so much potential coming into the league, and then he deals with all of these injuries. It just completely altered the trajectory of his own career to the point where he's just been nothing but a rotational piece over the past few seasons for different teams. I really don't know where the road leads for him here. I mean, he's so young. He's literally just 32 years old as of Valentine's Day this year. So I don't know. It might be rash for me to say that this would be the end of his career, but I don't know if there are too many other teams willing to take him on. At the very least, he might see a contract, a short-term deal from maybe one other team. And then that might be it for him. Unless he finds some way to get some sort of miraculous rejuvenated season with a roster. I don't know if he's going to be in the NFL for much longer. It's unfortunate, but I just have to be honest about that. And then they would also announce that Jonathan Brooks, the rookie running back from Texas that they drafted last season, who had missed extensive time last season due to injury, will now also be missing the entire 2025 season due to an ACL tear stemming back from last season. Definitely sucks. Because when he was playing, the few snaps that he did get with the team, he looked like a person who could genuinely provide a good change of pace compared to what Chuba Hubbard was doing. Like, he had some really good reps at times in that season. And then it gets cut so early, now it bleeds into him missing even more time. And just robbing him, depriving him of even more opportunities to make a name for himself in the league. You just hope that he has a speedy recovery and can, whenever he's able to come back in the league, continue to show just what he's capable of. But that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.